The millionaire freezes when he sees the beggar woman's pendant is the same as his mother's. New York City thrummed with urgency. Cars honked and people surged like waves against the shore of concrete and glass. The sun hung high, casting sharp shadows on the busy streets. But everything stopped for Thomas Wright, the successful millionaire known for his icy demeanor, who had built his empire through sheer will and an unyielding heart, suddenly stood frozen, his eyes locked onto her, a homeless woman huddled against the unyielding brick of a building, her clothes a patchwork of hope and despair. But it wasn't her tattered attire that held his gaze. It was the glint of a silver pendant swinging gently from her neck. The sun caught it, and it sparkled like the warmth of a memory he thought was buried. The pendant was the same as the one his mother had worn, the one he had clutched during the dark nights in his childhood. Feeling locked in a world of heartache, his chest tig. All that mattered was that pendant. Curiosity wrapped around him like a shroud. I have to know, he thought, a whisper against the cacophony of the street. He approached her slowly, his heart racing, a mix of dread and yearning churning inside him. What if she was connected to his past? What if she had answers he wasn't ready to hear? "Excuse me," he started, his voice barely breaking through the haze of his thoughts. Clara looked up, her eyes sharp, yet soft, filled with the kind of wisdom that can only come from surviving the darkest corners of life. At first, surprise flickered in her gaze, but it quickly gave way to something deeper, recognition perhaps. "Where did you get that pendant?" Thomas asked, pointing. And when he did, he felt the world tilt beneath him. Clara hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly as if weighing the gravity of her words. "It was my mother's. She always said it held the spirit of her ancestors," she replied slowly, her voice a soothing balm against the jagged edges of his emotions. With each word, memories flooded Thomas's mind. His mother's laughter, her gentle touch, the stories she'd told him, and the tragedies hidden in the family's past that he had tried to bury under success and ambition. As they spoke, he couldn't help but feel a strange connection, a bond he had never anticipated, an invisible thread tugging at the fabric of his carefully crafted life. His father's stern face flashed in his mind, the unwavering image of a man who lived for reputation and prestige. The conflict within him surged. Revealing his family's secrets could unravel everything. Thomas felt the weight of Clara's truths while grappling with his own. Why did this pendant bring forth such raw emotion? Who was this woman who wore the shadow of his mother around her neck? And just as he thought he was finding clarity, Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without prior notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you are still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming up. And since you're here, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Just as Thomas tried to process Clara's words, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Get away from her!" A man stood right behind Clara, his face twisted in anger. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his presence radiating a dark energy, that made the bustling street feel suddenly small and claustrophobic. Thomas's heart raced. He felt an urgent pulse of danger, as if the entire city had gone still, just for them. Clara flinched, turning toward the man. "Liam, please! What are you doing here? You don't belong in this part of town!" He spat, hands clenched at his sides, eyes flashing like warning signs. The tension thickened, and a group of onlookers began to gather, their whispered conversations drifting in the air like smoke. Thomas felt a knot in his stomach. Who was this man? More importantly, what did he mean by, "You don't belong"? "I was just talking," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. But there was a steeliness in her gaze. Thomas noticed then how the pendant swung between Clara's fingers, and the glint of it suddenly felt more ominous than nostalgic. "This isn't your life anymore. These are not your people," Liam yelled, stepping forward. The swirl of the crowd fell silent, their breaths held tight. Thomas's heart thudded heavily in his chest, fear prickling up his spine. "Who are you?" Thomas finally managed to ask, stepping protectively closer to Clara, instinctively feeling a need to shield her. Liam's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You don't even know, do you?" Before Thomas could respond, Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. He waved it in the air, the crowd leaning in closer, eyes glued. "You want answers? This is your mother." Thomas froze. The world tilted again, and the sound of his pulse roared in his ears. The photograph landed in Liam's hand, and he turned it, revealing an image of a woman Thomas recognized instantly. His mother, vibrant and alive in that picture, her laughter echoing in his memory. But next to her stood a man, a striking resemblance to Liam. "What the?" Thomas breathed, feeling his heart race. "Your mother abandoned us. She left this life, and now you waltz in like you own the place. You want that pendant, eh? She loved it, cherished it, and look where it got us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. "Stop! You're lying!" he shouted, disbelief seeping through him. "No, I'm not!" Liam's eyes blazed with anger. "You're the child she left behind. She ran away, left us for her own selfish reasons. You think you have the right?" Clara's expression shifted, confusion mingling with fear. She gripped the pendant tightly, as if it might offer some protection from the storm brewing around them. "Your mother knew about us, Thomas. She never stopped thinking about her past, about the life she—" How could this be true? Everything he thought he knew, every cherished memory, suddenly felt tainted. He looked to Clara, seeking a glimmer of truth in her eyes, but she wore a mask of shock, uncertainty swirling there. A scream pierced the moment, a woman's voice calling for help from the street. The crowd turned, an electric tension rising as chaos ensued. Thomas felt the ground tremble beneath him, the past unraveling as he faced a future filled with more questions than ever. His life, once— The cry came again, urgent and desperate. It came from somewhere in the distance, and in that moment, time froze. The frenzy of emotions stalled, caught in a web of uncertainty, and all eyes darted toward the sound. Thomas and Clara exchanged worried glances. Tears pooled in her eyes. "What's happening?" he asked, voice trembling. But before she could answer, the crowd shifted again, people parting like waves to reveal chaos unfolding just a few blocks away. A young girl, no older than 10, stood at the edge of the throng, her face streaked with dirt and terror. She was yelling, pointing toward an alley where shadows swallowed everything in darkness. "My sister! She's in there!" Her small frame shook, and people began to murmur, the thrumming city coming alive with dread. Thomas felt the ground beneath him tremble. His mind snapped into fight or flight. "Let's go," he said, urgency slicing through the disbelief that had wrapped around him. Without waiting, he surged forward, pulling Clara along. The crowd parted before them, drawn in by the girl's raw fear. As they reached the alley, shouts grew louder. "Call the police! Someone help!" Bodies pressed close together. But all that Thomas could see was the girl, wide-eyed and trembling. Clara held his arm, her grip tight, grounding him somehow. Then Thomas saw the flicker of movement, dark shapes darting in an entrance at the mouth of the alley. "Stay back!" he bellowed, instinctively pushing Clara behind him. Heart racing, he stepped into the alley, adrenaline coursing through his veins. It was darker here, suffocating. But a flash caught his eye, a glimpse of fabric, a flash of white. "Over there!" he shouted, but before he could take another step, a sudden crash echoed through the air. A dumpster toppled, sending trash spilling everywhere, a cacophony covering the cries of the girl. "That's my sister!" the girl cried again, desperation radiating off her. The sounds of scuffling came closer. Thomas pushed ahead, fear coiling like a spring ready to unleash. Then he saw her, an unconscious figure curled against the wall, tattered clothes ripped and torn, his breath hitched. It was a woman, but she was too familiar. The resemblance struck him like lightning. Dark hair, delicate features, a face he knew well, but thought he'd left behind. "No," he whispered, the word barely escaping his lips. The past surged forward, dragging him down to its depths. This was his mother. "No," he shouted, stumbling back, confusion and betrayal crashing over him. "Mom?" The word tasted like ash. A bloody scrap of memory rolled through his mind. The laughter, the stories, all mocking him. "You left us. You abandoned me." The raw anger shook his voice. But then fear twisted it. Was she the one who had walked away? Liam's voice rose behind him, horrible and high. "You have to be kidding me! This can't be real!" Thomas turned, seeking refuge in Clara's eyes. But her look held shadows, a storm of realization brewing inside. Liam stepped closer, urgency spilling from him. "You've been played, man! Your mother, she didn't run from us!" But before he could finish, chaos unraveled as people around them drew away, gasps escaping lips. A figure emerged from the shadows. Another woman, familiar, with steel in her eyes. "Enough! All of you!" she barked, voice sharp as glass, cutting through the moments like a knife. The crowd froze. Clara gasped, eyes wide, confusion twisting her expression. "Mr. Wright?" The ripple of whispers broke out among them, shock radiating. Thomas's heart thundered. Reality began to blur. "Who are you?" he managed, shock rooting him to the spot. She smiled wickedly, a gleam of something dark dancing in her eyes. "I'm the one who's been waiting for you to come home," she declared, and the world tilted once more, leaving Thomas gasping at the edge of his unraveling life. The truth dangled before him, heavy and oppressive. Who was this woman? What secrets did she carry? He looked to Clara, to Liam, to the young girl, surrendering pain, past and future, all clashing in a tumbling storm. Everything he thought he knew was hanging by a thread, ready to snap. And as the wind blew cold against his skin, he realized he'd only just begun to unearth the depths of buried secrets. The world around Thomas was a swirl of chaos. The woman standing before him, the one who'd called him home, felt like a thunderclap in his heart. He couldn't shake the weight of everything that was happening. Clara's voice, soft and shaking, broke through the frantic thoughts racing through his mind. "What do you mean, waiting for him to come home?" But before she could finish, the dark-haired woman took a step forward. "Because he belongs to us, and so do you." Her eyes shimmered with an intensity that sent shivers down Thomas's spine. "Us? Who is us?" he demanded, panic clawing at his throat. The crowd fell silent, a collective breath held tight in anxious anticipation. The young girl stood frozen, tears glistening like diamonds on her cheeks. "You're my only hope," she whispered, voice barely audible. It fueled the urgency swirling in the air. Thomas felt a desperate need to protect her, but uncertainty churned within him. The woman's smirk deepened, a dangerous curve of her lips. "You think you know your family? You don't know anything." A ripple of unrest moved through the crowd. Whispers bounced off the brick walls, echoing around them. "Who is she? What does she mean? Is he really?" Suddenly, another figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing. Thomas narrowed his eyes. He recognized that silhouette. It was his father, Stephen Wright, his face a mask of confusion and rage. "What is going on here?" Stephen growled, pushing through the crowd, shoulders tight with authority. "Dad!" Thomas felt the burden of everything weigh him down as he called out, "Why are you here?" Stephen's eyes darted to Thomas first, then to the woman who had just declared him part of some hidden family. "You shouldn't be here, Emma," he spat. "I thought we were done with this." "Emma?" Thomas's heart raced. He had no idea who she was, but the sudden recognition in his father's voice sent alarms ringing in his mind. Emma took a step closer to Stephen, her expression a mix of anger and resolve. "You can't hide him from mistruth anymore, Stephen. He deserves to know." "Know what?" Thomas exploded, fear mixing with fury. "What truth? I don't understand." The tension in the air thickened as Clara squeezed his arm, grounding him in that moment. "You need to tell him." "Stephen," she said softly, but her voice was laced with fear. In that instant, a noise erupted. A siren's wail sliced through the night, sharp and urgent. The police had arrived. The crowd shifted, panic spreading like wildfire. "Get back!" Stephen barked, eyes darting. "This isn't over. You don't need to be caught up in this mess." But Emma pressed on, undeterred by the chaos around them. "Don't you see, Thomas? You're more than just your father's heir. You come from something bigger, something they've worked to bury." "Stop!" Thomas shouted, but his voice trembled, uncertainty gnawing at him. "Just stop!" Then, in a monstrous surge of movement, the girl behind him took off running back toward the alley. "No! Don't!" he yelled, horror striking him as he lunged after her. But before he could react, a scream sliced through the air, sharp and raw. A figure collapsed behind her, and the chaos erupted into frenzy. Thomas felt his heart shut down. A sense of dread punched through him as he looked back at the scene unfolding. Clara's face paled. "What's happening?" she cried, eyes wide. And then it hit him. The truth, the revelation that twisted the air with such force, it was as if the world had dropped away beneath him. The girl, Emma, and Stephen, all of them holding secrets. Secrets that could shatter the ground he stood on. At that moment, it wasn't just the past crashing back. It was the understanding that everything he believed, his life, his family, might have been a carefully constructed lie. He turned to the woman, desperation painted across his face. "What are you talking about? What is the truth?" A slow smile spread across Emma's face, an unsettling calm that brought a chill to his spine. "Everything you thought you knew is about to change, Thomas. The real story is just beginning." And the sirens wailed louder, drowning out the last of her words, leaving him teetering on the edge of an unknown world. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, begging to be unraveled. The sirens wailed louder, drowning out Emma's last words, but desperation cut through the noise. Thomas stood, heart pounding, clutching Clara's arm tightly, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The weight of everything was crashing down. "What truth?" he shouted again, desperation lacing his voice. But before the answer could form, another commotion erupted. A figure burst from the shadows at the mouth of the alley. It was not just any figure. It was a man in a dark suit, moving with purpose, his face cold and unyielding. Thomas's gut twisted as recognition hit him like a brick. It was Victor, his father's trusted advisor, the one who'd always been lurking in the shadows of his life. "Stay back!" Victor shouted, his voice booming over the crowd. "Everyone, clear the area!" Shockwaves rippled through the onlookers as Victor pushed past them. Thomas felt his skin prickle. Something was off. The urgency in Victor's eyes told him it was more than just a simple warning. "Thomas!" Victor's gaze snapped to him, eyes intense. "We need to talk, now!" "About what?" Thomas snapped back, fire in his belly. "What's going on?" Victor's expression darkened. Without waiting for an answer, he moved closer, his voice low but urgent. "It's about your mother. You don't understand." At that moment, a loud crash echoed, followed by terrified screams from the crowd. "Move!" Victor yelled, drawing Thomas's focus. But the space distorted as more chaos erupted. A woman scumbled backwards from the direction of the alley, her clothes torn, a frantic look in her eyes. It took Thomas a moment to register her face. His heart pounded faster when he recognized her as the woman from the photograph Liam had shown him. This woman looked just like his mother. "Help! Someone help me!" she screamed, glancing back toward the shadows, where order had broken down into chaos. "They're coming!" The crowd gasped collectively, eyes darting back and forth as if they were all part of a dreadful stage play. Who's coming?" Thomas shouted, feeling the ground shift beneath him. But before she could answer, one of the shadows from the alley lunged forward. A tall figure with dark eyes and a menacing smile. He swept through the crowd like a predator, staring straight at Thomas. "Enough of this charade!" he boomed, voice deep and resonant. "You think you can escape the truth?" Thomas's heart raced as the man approached, his grip on reality slipping. Clara stood frozen, fear etching her face. "What truth?" Thomas shouted. "What do you know?" "Everything!" The man laughed, a sound that chilled Thomas to the bone. "You all think you know who you are? Let me show you." Suddenly, with a flick of his wrist, he revealed a stack of old photographs. They fluttered like leaves in a storm as he tossed them into the air. One landed at Thomas's feet. He picked it up, feeling the air thicken around him. It was blurred, but somehow familiar. A younger version of his mother, arms wrapped around a little girl he recognized. The same dark hair, the same bright eyes. "Your sister," the man said, voice dripping with mockery. "This is the sister you never knew." The air crackled with disbelief. It was as if the ground beneath him had erupted into flames. The crowd gasped again, whispers swirling like a summer storm. "You're lying," Thomas breathed, but it sounded weak, even to him. "No, I'm not." The man stepped closer. "And your life? A carefully crafted lie to keep you from the truth? Is that why you left your past behind, Thomas?" The words crashed over him like ice water, jolting him awake. His heart raced. Every memory felt like it was being pulled apart, piece by piece. He turned to Clara, eyes wide, searching for answers. But she stood there, breathless, a new fear dawning on her face. As realization settled like a weight on his chest, everything shifted. His past, present, and future colliding into a single, disorienting moment. "What do you want from me?" "That's simple," the man said, a wicked smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I want you to choose, Thomas. Choose between the world you know and the family you've yet to discover." And with that, as the sirens blared and the crowd pulsated with tension, Thomas was left teetering on the edge with everything, his life, his identity, hanging in the balance, waiting for a decision he had no idea how to make. Thomas felt the world shudder around him. The man's words hung in the air, heavy with truth and betrayal. He glanced at Clara, her eyes wide, fear tightening every feature of her face. But then, in a flash, everything transformed. Out of nowhere, a loud crash erupted behind him, sending shockwaves through the crowd. People screamed, scattering like leaves in a tempest. Thomas spun around just in time to see a truck barreling down the street. Its driver clearly panicked, wheels skidding on the pavement. "Look out!" he yelled, instinctively pushing Clara aside. But the truck veered right, crashing into a food cart filled with fragrant, simmering soup. The explosion of metal and chaos drew the crowd's attention, pulling them in a different direction. A sound burst through the tense conversation, shattering the moment. Amid the fray, a blinding flash assaulted Thomas's vision as the ingredients spilled onto the pavement in a rainbow of colors. Bright vegetables mixing with the grit of the city. He stood frozen, mouth open, heart racing, a mix of fear and surprise washing over him. But then, in an instant, all the focus shifted. The young girl, still standing there, with tears glistening down her cheeks, let out a scream that pierced through the chaos, rising above the clamor. "No, Mom! Marie!" Thomas shouted, recognizing her voice. It was the same name as the girl in the photograph, the one he had seen with his mother. But before he could process it, everything spiraled into a maelstrom. The man who'd revealed the truth about Thomas's past stepped forward, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he pulled out a small device, pressing a button. There was a pulse that rippled through the air, followed by an electric hum that seemed to resonate through the ground. He was controlling something. "What did you do?" Thomas yelled, confusion twisting his features. But the man just laughed, a ringing sound that echoed against the backdrop of chaos. "You think you are the center of the universe, don't you? Believe me, Thomas, your life is no longer your own." As if on cue, the alley they had just emerged from suddenly erupted into light. Shadows morphed into figures, emerging from the darkness like phantoms. They were dressed in black, faces obscured, maneuvering with purpose. The crowd gasped, pressing back against one another. "Get out of the way!" someone screamed, their voice raw with fear. "Please, let them go!" Clara cried, reaching for Thomas's arm. But with each step the figures took, Thomas felt the tremors of his life shatter further. Then, just as the sunlight began to dim around the edges, a loud pop drew his attention. Eerie silence hung in the air, threads of chaos intertwining with a palpable confusion. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The figures were no longer shadows. They were soldiers, military-grade and poised, with grim expressions like wrought iron. One stepped forward and pointed right at Thomas, the movement deliberate and chilling. "He's the one we came for." "What do you mean?" Thomas gasped, a dreadful realization creeping into his mind. Was he caught in something much deeper than a family secret? Clara's eyes widened as she whispered, "They're here for you, for your family." But as the soldiers closed in, a deafening roar echoed above them. A helicopter appeared, swooping low, blades cutting through the noise. The spotlight from above illuminated everything, highlighting the... Before Thomas could piece together the whirlwind of revelations, the figures began to retreat, moving with quick precision. "No, don't leave!" he shouted. But they were disappearing, fading into the shadows. The man grinned, stepping closer to Thomas again, eyes glinting with a feverish light. "You've been chosen, Thomas. This is just the beginning." And as the helicopter loomed just overhead, the reality of the situation warped around him. He was standing on the precipice of something vast, dark and insidious. The truth, tangled in conspiracy and betrayal, loomed larger than any family secret he could comprehend. As the spotlight flickered and the chaos swirled, Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. What did it mean to be chosen? What did they want from him? The questions crashed over him like waves, drowning him in uncertainty. And as the figures dissolved into the fray, leaving behind tantalizing hints of a truth he had yet to grasp, Thomas was left standing alone, trapped between two worlds, his past unraveling as new shadows approached. What awaited him was cloaked in darkness, and he knew, somehow, everything he had ever known had been swept away in that single moment, leaving him hanging, breathless. The air buzzed with tension as Thomas stood frozen, caught in the chaos swirling around him. The man's eager grin still loomed large in his mind, twisting the reality he had thought was firmly in place. Clara clutched his arm tightly, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. The crowd pressed in, the sirens still wailing, creating a sharp cacophony of panic. The world outside felt distant, muted, like a TV softly playing in the background, while everything else spiraled into chaos. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" Thomas shouted, desperation pouring from him. The man stepped closer, but before the soldiers moved swiftly, kicking the crowd into a frenzy. Clara gasped as she stumbled backward, pulling Thomas with her. "We need to get out of here," she urged, eyes darting like frightened sparrows. But just then, the world split in half. A flash of light erupted behind them, blinding him momentarily. It wasn't just any flash. It was like a miniature bomb, swirling smoke and debris everywhere. People yelled, the air thick with panic and confusion. Disoriented, Thomas shielded Clara with his body, feeling the impact of chaos crashing all around. As the smoke swirled like a living creature, something pulled Thomas's gaze back to Emma, the woman who had revealed the truth. Her expression twisted into a mask of horror as she wrestled with a knife-wielding figure, struggling in the haze of smoke. "Get back!" she screamed. But before anyone could react, a loud roar shook the ground, rattling his teeth. It was another explosion, this one coming from within the alley. The scene blurred at the edges as panic surged. Thomas felt his heart race and breath quicken, each thud echoing louder in his ears. Then, from the thick smoke, a figure emerged. A woman, draped in shadows, face hidden beneath a hood. "Get him out of here!" she shouted, pointed directly at Thomas. The intensity of her voice cut through the chaos, and a wave of recognition washed over him, entwined with confusion. Suddenly, it dawned on him. It was his mother. "Mom!" His voice cracked, disbelief racing through him. The realization left him reeling. The woman he thought had abandoned him was now leaping through fire, directly into the storm that threatened them all. But before he could process that shock, something even more terrifying unfolded. The figures in black began to retreat, but not because they wanted to. A roar filled the air, heavy footsteps pounding, monstrous and relentless. Another group emerged from the shadows, but they were different. They were no uniforms. They were clad in street clothes. Thomas felt a thrill of fear as the leader, a man with wild eyes, raised a gun, pointing it directly at his mother. "Enough games! Hand him over!" he yelled, rage spilling from every word. In that instant, everything shifted. The pieces fell into place in a horrifying tableau. Emma, Thomas's mother, was caught between worlds, but now her choices came crashing down. "Mom, run!" Thomas screamed, but there was no time. The air trembled with the weight of fate. Emma turned, desperation etched on her face, but it was gone in a flicker. As the gun fired, everything went silent. A sickening thud echoed through the chaos as Thomas watched the bullet find its mark. Clara screamed, and panic unfurled around him like a tidal wave. It was a moment frozen in his mind, the world narrowing to a point where nothing felt real. Emma crumpled to the ground, and Thomas's breath hitched. The truth that had once felt like power now lay in shattered pieces, morphing into despair. "Mom, no!" he cried, heart-shattering. His world collapsed in slow motion. Clara gripped his arm tighter, unable to process the horror unfolding. The crowd was screaming. The soldiers were no longer controlling it. It was chaos unleashed, a storm of confusion and fear. He didn't know who was friend or foe, and the realization washed over him like ice water. He lost sight of everything in that fleeting moment, his identity, his past, and the truth he thought he held on to so tightly. In that gut-wrenching instant, the only thing clear was the choice slamming into him like a wave. Was he to follow the path of a hidden family, Or did he have to carve a new one from the ashes of betrayal and loss? And just as the noise began to fade, a chilling whisper echoed against the chaos, hanging heavy in the air. This was just the beginning, Thomas. The world spun and darkness loomed, engulfing him in uncertainty as he stood over the remains of everything he thought he knew. Still trapped, still searching. The world spun around Thomas, blurring the edges of reality. The sound of sirens, the screams, the chaos, it all fused into a single jarring noise. Clara held onto him tightly, her grip filled with fear, her face pale. But the sight of his mother, Crump, he knelt beside her, heart racing. The warmth of anger and hurt pulsed through him. He couldn't let this be how it ended. He brushed her hair from her face, desperate for a sign, something to give him hope. But the lifelessness in her expression chilled his heart. In that gut-wrenching moment, a figure emerged from the smoke. It moved swiftly, purpose in its step. It was Liam. His face was a mix of anger and desperation. "We need to get out of here," he shouted. "But my mother," Thomas's voice broke, panic spilling over. "No time! Trust me!" Liam grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him toward the crowd as chaos unfolded. Thomas glanced back. Every instinct screamed to stay with her, but something deep inside urged him forward. Maybe there were answers waiting for him, the secrets he needed to uncover. They pushed through the crowd, moving away from the chaos just as the soldiers started advancing again. Gunfire erupted, and people took off in every direction, hearts pounding in unison. Clara stumbled, and Thomas caught her, feeling her shake against him. "What's happening? Who are those people?" she asked, eyes wide, desperation spilling over. "Not now," Liam said, urgent, leading them farther down the street. "There's something you need to know." "Something about your mom." Just as fear and urgency filled the air, a deafening silence blanketed the street. The chaos seemed to hold its breath. Thomas felt his chest tighten. The shift was palpable. An impending storm. "Look!" Liam yelled, pointing up. A spotlight cut through the sky, illuminating a figure atop a nearby building. The crowd turned, distracted, caught in the magnetism of the sudden calm. It was Emma, alive, fearlessly confronting the soldiers, arms raised high. "Stop this!" she cried. "You have no power here. This is my family." Thomas's heart raced. Was she really alive? He felt hope flickering in the darkness like a dying flame. "Mom!" he shouted, but she wasn't listening. Moments later, without warning, the figure on the roof began to glow, an otherworldly brightness enveloping her. "Everyone, stand back!" she commanded, immense power resonating within her. The crowd gasped as the light intensified, pushing back the soldiers. Their eyes widened in fear, and then everything exploded into chaos once more. The light expanded, enveloping everything in its path. And then, in an instant, everything went dark. Thomas stumbled. His senses collided as he felt weightless, as if suspended in time. The air shifted, and he could hear whispers, soft, familiar voices. He blinked against the darkness, squinting to make sense of what was happening. Then, like flipping a switch, the light returned, not from above, but all around him. And in a blinding flash, Thomas found himself standing in a strange place. A vast hall, filled with glowing symbols and shadows darting past. "What the hell is this?" he breathed, barely grasping the enormity of what he was seeing. And standing before him, amidst the chaos, was Emma, but not as he remembered her. A shroud of confusion wrapped around him. "What truth?" he demanded, desperation clawing at his throat. Suddenly, the shadow shifted, and he felt an unfamiliar presence around him. The figures were familiar faces, friends, family, all within reach, yet just beyond grasp. And among them, he finally noticed Clara, her eyes wide with worry and wonder. "Whatever you're doing, stop!" Thomas shouted, looking between them, panic igniting in his chest. But at that moment, Liam stepped forward, a darker expression settling on his features. "It's time to make a choice." Before he could react, the entire hall trembled. An earth-shattering explosion resonated through the space, shaking Thomas to his core. The figures around him wavered, vanishing like wisps of smoke, the truth retreating into shadows. "Thomas," a voice cried as everything began to unravel. "You must choose soon, or you'll lose everything." And in that moment, the weight of his reality crashed down on him. He was at a fork in the road, between worlds he barely understood. And with every ounce of his heart, he felt the ground tremble beneath him, wondering what the choice would cost him, and if he would even survive it. The air crackled with tension. Thomas felt it deep in his bones. He was caught between worlds, an unbearable weight pressing down on him. The moments stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. Clara's hand squeezed his, grounding him, but he could almost feel the ground rumbling beneath them, as if it, too, sensed the impending storm. "Choose," Liam said, urgency etched into his features. The echo of the explosion hung in the air, mingling with the shouts of the crowd. Thomas looked back at Emma, his mother. No, not just a mother, but a woman full of secrets and wounds. "What do you mean?" he shouted, desperate for answers. In that fraction of a second, the light shifted again. A large shadow loomed over Thomas. It was as if the darkness itself had teeth. A loud voice boomed from above. "Thomas Wright, your time has come." He looked up, but it wasn't just Emma bathed in that eerie glow. It was something else entirely. A flash surged, overwhelming his senses. Suddenly, a bright light erupted from the ceiling of the hall. The figures around him flickered in the brilliance. Thomas's heart raced, chaos swirling through his mind. But then came a thunderous clap, shaking him to the core. He covered his ears, but the sound filled him entirely, a compression of air and fear. Instead of a comforting reality, he found himself standing in a different world. Screams echoed around him, the clash of voices fighting to be heard. Broken glass scattered like starlight across the floor beneath his feet. The walls shook as if the structure itself screamed. And then he saw them. Images flashing like an old film strip. Faces, familiar faces, smiling faces. His father, his mother, even Clara, but in wrong contexts. They were all there, but something felt off. A gnawing sense of betrayal crept in. These weren't just memories. They were mockeries. His breath hitched. "What's happening?" he murmured, confusion twisting his stomach. Then came a deafening silence. The sounds diminished to muffled whispers, shadows dancing on the edges of his vision. The crowd around him stood frozen, mouths agape, wide eyes reflecting horror and betrayal. "Wake up, Thomas!" a voice shouted. It was Emma's voice, but it boomed like thunder. In a hazy rush, she began to transform. Light enveloped her, radiating power and chaos combined. No! No! Thomas felt panic claw at him. What's going on? This isn't real! But then, Emma and Clara exchanged a glance that sent a shock through him. A shared understanding that transformed everything. Without warning, a massive portal ripped open behind them. Dark tendrils twisted and curled as if alive, threatening to consume them all. "Mom, step back!" he yelled. But it was too late. Emma lunged toward the portal, arm outstretched, weaponized resolve etched in her eyes. "I'm doing this for you. You need to understand." With a sudden thrust, she vanished into the void. A rippling shockwave slammed against him, sending Thomas stumbling back. Clara gasped, the crowd recoiling, horror pouring from their faces. "No!" Thomas shouted, fear mixing with anger. But it was too late. The portal snapped shut, cutting Emma from his sight, silencing her voice. The ground quaked, the air electrified. From the shadows emerged another figure, a glimpse of someone Thomas recognized, their face stark against the dark. "It's time for you to know the truth," the figure said, voice steady yet haunting. It was Liam, but there was something different about him. His eyes glinted with a twisted knowledge. What are you?" Thomas stammered, every instinct screaming at him to run. Liam shrugged, something sinister lurking beneath his calm exterior. "Your mother, Thomas. She wasn't just a standard keeper of family secrets. She's been playing a dangerous game, and you are a key piece on the board." Thomas felt a cold chill race down his spine. "What do you mean?" The whispers around them grew louder, a cacophony of voices that swirled through the air. "You're not just her son, Thomas," Liam said, stepping forward. "You're the heir to a legacy far beyond what you're imagining." The crowd shifted, murmurs of disbelief and confusion spreading like wildfire among them. The air thickened with tension as truth hints danced like flesh-eating shadows. "And your sister?" Liam continued, a cruel smile painted on his lips. "She's been watching from afar, waiting for the right moment. But now it looks like the clock is striking midnight." Thomas's head spun. "Sister? What sister?" But before Liam could answer, the ground shook violently again. Eyes wide with shock, Thomas realized this was only the beginning of what they had yet to uncover. Everything he believed was about to spiral into something darker, dangerous, as secrets began peeling away like layers of forgotten dreams. His heart raced. The truth loomed close, yet always out of reach. What awaited him as the darkness closed in? All he could do was brace himself for the unimaginable. Thomas stood at the center of chaos, his heart racing. The shadows twirled around him, voices fading in and out, like a radio on the fritz. He glanced at Clara, her eyes wide, fear etched into her features. "We can't let them take you!" Liam's voice broke through, urgency spilling from him as he pulled Thomas closer. "You need to choose, Thomas." "Choose?" Thomas echoed, confusion mixing with fear. He didn't want to think, didn't want to choose anything. Not now. Not when everything felt like it was falling apart. "Your family, the truth your mother fought for. It's all connected. You need to embrace it." Liam pressed, desperation flooding his tone. But all Thomas could hear was the pounding of his heart. In the chaos, the figures shifted and twisted, and for a brief moment, he felt a surge of warmth, of connection. Emma, his mother, was gone, but the memory of her kept flickering in his mind. All those moments they'd shared, her laughter, her stories, they weren't just echoes. They were part of him. But as reality crashed back in, the weight of a gunshot rang in his ears, and everything turned dark. He stumbled, trying to grasp the fragments slipping from his reach. "Don't let fear control you," Clara's voice called out, steady and fierce. Thomas turned to her, and in her eyes he saw something more: determination. "Together!" he shouted, gripping her hand tightly as he steeled himself against the chaos. Just then, the shadows that crowded the hall began to swirl, and the figures lurched toward them. The light flickered, pulling Thomas in. "This is your chance, Thomas!" a voice echoed, booming through the air. "What chance?" he yelled back. A choice loomed ahead, thick like fog, hiding the answers he so desperately needed. The ground shook again, and Thomas squeezed Clara's hand harder. "We can't let this end here." He felt her fear mingling with his own. Together, they stood against the tide of darkness rushing towards them. "Make a decision!" Liam's voice rang out, but it felt so empty against the roaring chaos. "Fight or flee!" Clara urged, determination shining in her eyes. "Fight!" Thomas shouted, the word roaring from his chest. The shadows faltered, wavering, and in that moment he could feel his resolve solidifying. "For my mother!" The room shifted, the shadows momentarily retreating, as if they understood what the call to arms meant. Clara nodded, a flicker of hope igniting within her. But then, suddenly, everything went bright. Emma reappeared, glowing more brilliantly than before. "You've made your choice, Thomas! Embrace it!" Her voice rang like bells, carrying through the air. "All or nothing!" Thomas bellowed, the heat of his emotions surging forth, fueled by love and loss. In one decisive moment, he lunged forward. Shadows crumbled around him, and the truth erupted from the layers of secrets like a bomb. A blinding light enveloped him, bathing everyone nearby in warmth. "Together!" Clara echoed, her voice intertwining with his, and with a burst of energy, they leapt into the light, feeling everything converge, their strength, their pain, their shared bond. The world around him exploded with color, emotions swirling, freedom, pain, and an impending understanding. Secrets began to unfold, flows of truth washing away the history of hurt. And just like that, in a flicker of Wardfin light, they were gone. In the aftermath, silence cloaked the room. The shadows trembled, retreating into oblivion. The crowd stood still, processing the salvation that had come from the heart of chaos. Thomas felt the weight of everything lift as warmth enveloped him. But the journey didn't end here. "Remember!" Emma's voice echoed faintly, a whisper on the wind. "Your family is always with you." And then came a rush, an electric pull toward the unknown, uncharted territory waiting to be explored. But Thomas knew, no matter what lay ahead, he would face it all, with Clara by his side. They would carve their path from the ashes of pain, embracing the truth they had uncovered. And he felt the spark of hope ignite. The story wasn't over. It was just begun. So there you have it, folks. If you don't want to miss a beat of what comes next, you need to subscribe now. Hit that red button below so you won't miss the upcoming exclusive stories. We've got a lot more in store. And give that like button a good smash. Your support helps boost the algorithm and brings this community closer together. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about this ending. I want to hear what you think. And don't wait 1 second more. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know this conclusion. True fans, support the channel. Let's keep this story alive together.